Hello, everyone, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to my YouTube channel, Conversations with Rudy Rivera. Today, I am super thrilled to have two guests, Tom Ham and Luisa Maria Rivera, who we are going to discuss today why we sabotage ourselves and how can we stop. But before we get into the substance of our conversation, I would like for all of you to subscribe and ring the bell to my channel, because when you do that, you will get many more interesting, provocative videos on topics that affect us all today. Welcome, everyone, again. Tom, thanks for agreeing to come on. Luisa, thanks for agreeing to come on. Tom, let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure. I am a doctorate in psychology and been practicing clinically, I don't know, for 20 plus years. I've taken a couple of career breaks for teaching, but the last dozen years I've worked for the Veterans Administration doing clinical psychology. Previously, I did that for the United States Navy. I've also worked in psychiatric inpatient facilities, outpatient, and school consulting. So I used to have a specialty in substance abuse. Now most of my work is with post-traumatic stress, some aging issues, cognitive assessment, but not at the level of expertise of my fellow guest here, Luisa, and just so there's the VA is a good place to see lots of different things.
Okay, Luisa, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure, I have a background in neuropsychology. I've practiced both in Ecuador and in Spain. I am currently working as a research coordinator with the patients with brain injury, especially stroke. I have experience with dementia, with child psychology, psychiatric problems, and I am about to start teaching also, and hopefully start my practice back in Ecuador.
Thank you for appearing, Luisa Maria. It's great to have you here on the show. Let's start right off with, let's define the concept. What is self-sabotage? Tom, what is it?
Well, I think in the most basic form, it's when someone says or thinks they want to do something that they have control over in their lives, and they're unable to meet that objective. I guess is the simplest way I can put that.
But when you say they're unable to meet their objective, is that because they intentionally go out to sabotage it, or there's something in their subconscious that says, no, you shouldn't do it? Some inner voice saying, don't do it.
Well, I think that's my job as a therapist, is to, as the best of my ability, understand why someone says they want something and they're not able to make progress towards that, or they make some progress and they slip back. So that's and I think that's the crux of the matter, is trying to understand exactly what for each individual is that barrier or set of barriers that gets in the way. And I would certainly yield to Luisa in terms of the brain physiology that's behind someone making a life change. There's lots of competing signals, I think, within that, at least that's my perspective, within that brain, for whether one moves ahead with making a change in their life, or whether they stay exactly doing what they've always been doing.
Luisa, you want to add to that?
I agree that this is more of an unconscious thing, and it could be because I'm setting up a goal that I know is not attainable necessarily, or that irrationally I believe I cannot attain it. So like you said, your work is amazing, and trying to figure out, why is it that I believe I can't attain it? Or why am I setting up myself to failure by giving me a goal that I know I can't go to?
Yeah. So what they do is they then say, I want to be a doctor. I want to be a lawyer, but I can't because, well, I have to work, or I can't because of one thing or the other. And they never really reach their goal. Or they do something in their lives that is that just prevents it from doing it. And then they say, see, I was right. I have a real good example of that. That four best friends in high school, one of which was probably the smartest of the four. Well, there was a pecking order. Of course, I was the dumbest, and they were all the smartest. But David, my friend, wanted to be a police officer, was accepted to the Miami Police Academy, was an excellent writer, and he wanted to write novels, like the famous police authors who write novels. I think Tom was one of them. Well, a week before he had to go, he put his fist through a plate glass window and cut tendons in his hand, and therefore couldn't go. And that was him sabotaging his career. Rather than saying, I don't want to go, I don't want to be a police officer, he sabotaged himself and decided not to do it. And so, I mean, how often do you see overt physical acts where people just say, I'm doing it,
Well, I think it kind of depends on the area of sabotage you're talking about. Certainly in addiction work, there's all sorts of behaviors that people say they want to be clean, sober, etc., get their life back together. But that brain has a pattern established and a whole reward system established. And so it's easy to think with our cortex and, want to be rational, be healthier, etc. But there are an enormous amount of competing signals coming from that brain, and may well be largely unconscious to do as we've done before, or to do things that I think in your example, Rudy, and it sounds like it's more a case of someone who really didn't believe they could succeed. And so setting themselves up for failure is safer than sabotaging before they can fail is safer than failing.
Or even in some ways safer than saying, well, I just don't want to do it anymore.
Well, you open up the whole question, what is motivation? And Luisa referenced that. As my training was, there's two main components to motivation. One, is it really valuable? In your instance of your friend, do I really want to be a police officer who writes, crime stories, whatever that was? And then the other part of motivation is, well, can I do that? So there's both the pull of the objective as well as some form of self-assessment about one's ability to pull it off.
Luisa, you want to add to that from a neuroscience's point of view?
Well, there's many things that have been said. When you were talking about addiction, for instance, of course, rationally, the person might want to do these changes, but the brain, the neurotransmitters, their reward circuit system might not allow them to do this as easy. So it's not a matter of me wanting to change and not doing it. It's a matter of biologically, it's not that easy as it sounds. So you have to work behavioral, cognitive, with the family, the support system. So there's a lot of things going on rather than saying, oh, you're not just putting a good effort on it. And also, it's like you said also, Tom, it's easier to stay in my comfort zone, and it's better for me to stay, even if it's not the best option, to stay where I know and what I'm familiar with, rather than going out there. So your example about this police officer saying, oh, well, my hand is shattered, so now I can't do it. It's better to blame it on that than to blame it on me that I didn't want to do it.
Well, there's an article in Psychology Today by Ellen Hendrickson, and it talks about why we sabotage. And one of her points she talks about is self-worth. We often have a low self-esteem and we think we don't deserve it. Do you agree with that, Tom and Luisa?
Oh, I'll jump in. Yeah, I do think that's one of the speaks to one of the two main components of motivation. Can I do it? Am I able to pull this off? And if you don't believe you can, then you can't. So, and depression really is, my mind, a simple way to look at depression is that a doubting of yourself, self-worth, etc. And so it's kind of a disease of not trying. And again, it's better to not try than to try and fail and then fail.
Luisa.
Yeah, so I believe that you're right. Self-esteem can affect this. And sometimes I think that one believes that one can't do it, and not necessarily in a rational way. So if we are able to tackle these irrational beliefs that I can't do it by proving the things that I have been able to do, we might be able to help this learned helplessness. Because if I fail, it's telling myself, oh, see, again, I couldn't do it. And there is the reason why I'm not going to do it again. And so you learn that you're helpless by down spiraling on these irrational beliefs and negative thoughts about yourself.
I think lack of self-esteem can come from two sources. It can come from you believing that you're not good enough and you think I am not worthy. Or it can also come from a lifetime of people telling you you're not worthy. Then you start to believe it. So there's like the person who looks in the mirror and says, oh, I'm fat, I'm ugly. Or if you look at, for example, the lady who just committed suicide, former Miss USA, when you look at it from our eyes, she had everything to live for. A brilliant law career, lived in a nice apartment in New York. But for some reason, she felt something, that forced it. And I realize, suicide is another issue. But what I'm getting to is the issue of you can either impose that on yourself or other people impose it on you over the years and you start to believe it. Would you agree? I mean, it's how I see it. And I'm not a psychologist. I play one on TV. But
I yield to Luisa on her first reaction on that one.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that help you with your self-esteem and your self-worth. And that could be your upbringing, your coping mechanisms, your social support. So if I am constantly being told all of the negative things, then I'm going to focus on what I don't have and then put that against myself. Like you said, oh, I'm fat, I am ugly. But if I am with an upbringing that tries to focus more on positive things, like, okay, well, I am overweight, but I am healthy or I am happy about it, and that does have an effect on your brain overall. Like you were mentioning, your depression, and not only that, but also anxiety about future. And so if I start to get worried about my future, I would rather just not risk it and stay where I am because this is what I know, and therefore not try to fail in the future.
Yeah.
Tom, you want to add to that?
No, I think it's well said. And just like when Luisa mentioned with someone struggling with an addiction, there's clearly, as I understand it, substantial changes in the brain neurochemistry. I think certainly the same is true in some, a lot of clinical depressions. And it's, it's to the level that from an outside perspective, that person just looks plain delusional. And yeah, I mean, enough messages about, one's self-worth, et cetera. Some people can be enormously resilient and not I guess I was going to use the word interject, a little clinical there, not take on those messages, but, frankly, most of us, value the input of others and enough negative input, and we believe it. And, repeat a lie often enough and people will believe it. So
If you tell a lie big enough, people will believe it too. That was
yeah. Apparently that's one of the rules. The bigger, the better.
the bigger the lie, the better.
Yeah.
Well, when you look at, like in my situation when I grew up, there were a number of people who said you'll never amount to anything. And so you could either react, okay, they're right. I took the position, well, I have nothing to lose.
Yeah.
If I'm nothing and I fail, then okay, they're right. I'm nothing. But if I succeed and I'm right, they'll be eating crow, as I say it, right?
Well, you were able to exhibit the resilience. I mean, without, thinking it through, you somehow were blessed, whatever you want to say, had the wherewithal to turn that into a challenge.
Well, the way I looked at it is, what do I have to lose? So I was raised by a single mother on welfare. In my mind, I mean, there are always people who are worse off than you. I mean, people always think they have it bad, but there's always somebody worse, somebody better. But in my mind, as a young boy, I was at a low point. Okay. And my thinking was, what do I have to lose? I'm already a failure. I could easily fail at other stuff, and then just keep going. And that was my motivation. But I see people that just start to believe it, and they say, well, I can't. And then they put all these hurdles and obstacles in front of them.
Right. I mean, that's the basis of cognitive processing therapy, is to look at that self-talk, and with a therapist, really break that thought down. Is that valid? Should you base your life on a thought that, well, no, I will never make it? Well, never's a lot. That's the kind of very small sample of cognitive processing. So looking at the thoughts that you tell yourself, and some, can lead to more sabotaging, and others can lead to resilience, which you exhibited in spades there.
Well, I think that you can either take control or not take control. And you've got
My
and
favorite topic.
yeah, well, that is, it feels better to control your own failure rather than to face the possibility of it blindsiding you and taking you by surprise. That's what Dr. Hendrickson says in her article. So let's talk about your favorite topic of control, taking control.
Well, I think that's one of the best ways in life to either succeed or make yourself pretty miserable. By what do you actually control? What is that boundary over that control? Luisa referenced it with someone who might be a bit overweight. Okay, I am, but is that all there is to me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so one could see other aspects that would lead to a better self-esteem, less depressed, and then probably more energy to actually move towards their weight goal. But if you keep feeding yourself things that are negative, that you don't control, this is I know I'm on the soapbox now. For example, tox news. I just call it tox news. That's not a reference to any particular media source, but there's a lot of toxic information being presented in our present culture. And if you can't control any of those outcomes, that the sky is falling, people are making a lot of money off of, why keep eating it? It's a poison. And so look at what you control.
Yeah. Luisa, do you want to add to what Dr. Ham says?
Yes, well, I agree. If you focus on the things you can control, you can have a plan for yourself, and having a plan or a control over things near you, it gives you less anxiety and more control over your actions. And so it lessens the possibility of other pathologies like depression, anxiety, and even self-sabotage. So I think that's one of the ways you can help yourself avoid sabotage or many other things. What can I control at this moment? What can I can't control? Because if I focus on the things I can do, then I have a plan of action. And if I don't, then I go down spiral.
Somebody asked me once, why don't you get bent out of shape or so stressed out? And Luisa, you've known me for a long time. You very seldom see me.
All my life.
Huh?
I've known you all my life, yes.
Yes, yes. Well, I have to disclose that Luisa's my daughter, which I'm very proud of. So, who's become an accomplished neuropsychologist. Uh, I think that you end up stressing more over things you can't control than things you can control. So, for example, my world was litigation. And for example, Tom, in the area of international adoptions where you knew me, there were a lot of factors outside of my control. A lot of factors, and they would change, as you know, from one moment to another at the drop of a hat. And I was constantly scrambling, but I focused on what I could control and not worried about what would happen down the road. And then I would say, well, what's my plan? Just when you fix one thing, something else happens. So, in the same way in the world of litigation, I can't control what a jury's going to do. I can't control what a judge is going to do. I can't control what witnesses are going to say, but I can control the evidence I put on. And I focus on that rather than all the external things. My personal opinion, and again, I'm not a psychologist. I play one on TV. I'm sort of playing one now. Is you'll be more successful if you concentrate on the things you can control and not stress out over things you can't control. And I think something that is a downer for people, can have a negative impact, is your impression of what other people think about you, because that's nothing you can control.
Exactly.
You know, go ahead, Tom. Do you want to comment on that? Or you
Well,
say, I agree with you 100%, Rudy, and we're going to give you an honorary PhD in psychology.
yeah. I just got to find the institution to call to get one going your way.
Yeah, find one to get one going for me.
But you're talking as you talk. I'm just reminded of the concept that's pretty popular these days in psychology is the idea of resilience, and it really is based on what do I control, what don't I control, and if you don't control it, why spend any energy on it, or find a way to spend energy on it that is in your control.
Exactly.
So, you don't like the way the nation is going? Oh boy. I don't control which way the nation goes.
But you can run for office.
You can run for office. You can volunteer on a campaign. You can write letters. You can start your own blog.
Or your own YouTube channel.
Your own YouTube channel. Right. And, start taking some action. And I think that, the older I get, the more in my career, the more I look back at behaviorism. And, a famous guy once said that motivation is not a frame of mind, it's an activity. So you want to have goal X. I want to exercise more. Wonderful. Just sitting around thinking about it is an exercise.
You have to take action.
Just
Yeah.
start it. My mantra is just start. Just try something.
Or do something, do anything, right? I mean, well, not anything, but just do something towards that goal.
Yeah.
I remember let's just say that you say, I want to be a millionaire. Well, you also have to set a realistic goal. Anyone can be a millionaire in this time. I mean, you see instant billionaires with Bitcoin and other things going on, but you're making 50,000 a year and you say, okay, I want to be a millionaire. I think you have to set yourself a series of achievable goals. You can say, next year I'm going to make 100,000. And the year after that, I'm going to make 150,000. So you're working that way by what I call like the baby steps of your main goal to achieve it. And then you see a sense of accomplishment. And then you get motivated even more to accomplish.
Right. You have some success, you build on that success, etc. And Rudy, you really should be a psychologist.
You think?
Should be, Luisa.
Luisa, what do you think? You think your dad should be a psychologist?
Maybe. Sure. I wanted to say that I think it's important to differentiate if this thing you want to do comes from an intrinsic motivation or an extrinsic motivation. Because I might hear my dad telling me, you should be a lawyer all my life. And that's an extrinsic motivation. But if I want to do it myself, then I have the tools to move forward because I want to do it. And then also determine what is it that I'm really motivated for. If I want to be a lawyer because I really want to, change the laws and help those in need, or because I want the status of being a lawyer. Because that will determine if I am truly going to go for it or not, or if I'm going to find excuses to avoid because I don't truly want it. And also referencing something you said before, one of the things in the behavioral rational theory is that people are bothered about what they think of facts rather than facts. So for instance, if you say is a knife good or is a knife bad? It could be both, right? But it depends on what connotation you give it. I can use a knife to cook and that's very helpful, or I can use a knife to kill somebody and then that's bad. So what is that belief you're giving it to a fact? That's what affects people the most, I think.
That's very perceptive, Lisa. I think that people, when I went to law school, there were people who were going to law school just because their dad was a lawyer, but they really weren't into it. So is it something you really want, or is it something you think somebody else wants for you? I find that when people go that route, they're not as happy as the people who say, this is what I really want to do. Because then your work doesn't become your passion. It's just an 8-hour or 10-hour a day interference with the other things you love to do, is the way I look at it. So I think, basically, what you can control is extremely important. I think if anything, I think probably one of the most important messages we get today for our audience is don't sweat over things you can't control. Do what you can control, do what you can control, and move forward. If you use the weight loss analogy, and let's say you're 100 pounds overweight, at one point I was 60 pounds overweight. And I just thought, I'm going to take it 5 or 10 pounds at a time. I'm going to take it one meal at a time. I'm not going to worry about the 60 pounds I have to lose. I'm going to worry that, okay, this week I lost 4. Good. Or I'm at lunch with friends. They're having pizza. Let me exert the discipline for just this meal and not worry about the discipline I have to exert for the whole time to lose the 60 pounds. So when people's goals are too, like they want to get to it quickly, it's, oh my God, this is what I have to do. And they don't concentrate on the little victories. I think they also lose control there. Well, 60 pounds and, I'm going to have this pizza, but I'll start tomorrow. I still got my goal down the road, but they're losing control at that moment.
Yeah. I guess I think there is a corollary to the intrinsic motivation just from, a career now and trying to be at that cutting edge, so to speak, of people making a change in their lives. And I think people, there's a whole, change process theory, Prochaska, DiClemente, Norcross, and then hundreds of people have jumped on that bandwagon. I could have a drinking problem, but if I don't think I have that problem, I don't have a problem. On the other hand, it's not likely I'm going to all of a sudden one day, although there's certainly a subset of people who do this. Also, one day I'm going to stop drinking, and they do quit. But it's much more likely something happens negatively, and then I start to think, well, maybe I shouldn't drink whiskey. There's the problem, So you move from problem, who, me? No, I don't have a problem, to, well, once in a while I have a problem, to, oh, goodness, yeah, I've got a problem. And I think moving along in that, as I've seen it, certainly in some of the more clinical realms, I think external input is pretty important to moving people to recognition, to awareness that something has to change. I think a life goal, like a profession, that, more about just the intrinsic stuff. But in my clinical work, I do think, significant others have a strong motivating factor for people to start to look at what they might need to change.
What do you think about perceived fraudulence? So when you say get promoted, for example,
Okay.
you feel
imposter syndrome.
Yeah, the imposter syndrome, where you think, oh my God, I don't belong here. I don't belong here, or also the higher you get promoted, the harder you fall. So if you fail big time the more you go up. If you're just, say, a worker with no responsibilities, there's not much you can fail. But you become a supervisor, there's a higher place to fall from. You become a manager, higher place to fall from. And that could be also why I believe people will self-sabotage themselves, because they just think, oh, I can't do it because what if I fail? Oh my God, it's going to be terrible. I'm comfortable where I'm at, right? Luisa, why don't you say something on that?
Well, I am very fond of a behavioral cognitive therapy, and it talks about certain demands that people have, right? And so I want to be successful. I want to be accepted and loved. I need to be moral and ethic. So if I don't have one of those, I have conflict. So if I am afraid of failing and not having success, then I am afraid that I will be conflicted by that. And so I would rather stay where I am now instead of facing the possibility of that failure and disappointing other people. So I think that all of these problems are based on sometimes irrational beliefs or things you learned when you were little. And I think you need to tackle how you see that failure. How bad is that? What is the worst case scenario if I fail? If they promoted me and I failed, what is the worst thing that could happen? Maybe the worst thing that could happen is not as bad as I think.
Tom, what do you think about that?
Well, I just a little different, maybe a little different context. I see a lot of people who are really high achievers who use the self-doubt as a motivation to achieve. And it's very valuable. It's, I think you see it all the time in athletics. If someone, that doubts you, it's like, oh, well, you doubt me? I'll show you.
I'm going to show you.
I'm going to show you. And I think a lot of that is also internal. I'm going to show myself. You have self-doubt. Self-doubt can be great. And in fact, without self-doubt, you get things like narcissists and psychopaths.
Yeah, I believe arrogance is is the beginning of your decline.
Yeah. Well, I agree. But look at what happens. So someone is a very high achiever. They've used some of that self-doubt as a motivation to achieve. I don't know if I can do this. I'm not sure I can do this. Maybe I'm not as good as these other folks, but I'm gonna show them I think I can do that. Well, then once you achieve it, game has changed. You don't have motivation anymore. How did I get here? Should I really belong here? Well, if all your achievement is based on that self-doubt, there's a short step to, oh goodness, if they really knew me, they would realize that I am an imposter, or I'm not very worthy, etc. So I think it's, in that sense, it's closely connected to a positive motivation.
But I can see where it's a double-edged sword. It can motivate you to a certain point, and then it can keep you from moving forward.
Yeah.
And I agree that arrogance is, if you don't have any doubt, you get arrogant, you think you're the best. And people who think they're the best are often the ones who fall.
Well, my belief, the ones that the arrogant are trying to persuade themselves, they're probably pretty big self-doubters to begin.
In the company world, they'll look at BlackBerry, right? BlackBerry was at the top of its game, thought it was untouchable, and now you barely see a BlackBerry anymore. Blockbuster Video, all these other people that rule the roost, and now they didn't. So I can see where you get that. I had similar feelings at one point. For me to become a lawyer in my mind was very difficult, through the obstacles I faced. And when I finally became one, I just thought, oh my God, what now? You remember the movie The Candidate with Robert Redford? Luisa, you're too young to remember this movie, but and this whole movie is about him getting elected. The end of the movie says, what do I do now? And I literally thought that, what do I do now?
Yeah.
Only because it was such a struggle for me to get it. I've had a lot of obstacles to come through it. Okay, I'm here. So I get to try my first jury trial in Ironton, Missouri as a young lawyer. And I'm sitting there, do I belong here? First thought, I thought, do I belong here? And I kept thinking, I worked as a janitor in high school, and I kept thinking the sheriff's going to come out and say, hey, the broom closet's over there, start sweeping up. And then what triggered in my mind is, okay, I'm jumping in. Whatever happens, happens. And I won my first jury trial. And at that point, that was confidence. And I said, okay, I'm meant to do this. I'm going to keep doing it until somebody tells me to stop. And that somebody's not going to be me. So I can personalize it through those experiences, But I think I, for my sanity, had to stop caring about how people perceive me or what they think about me. It's really more about what you think about yourself. So 1,000 people can say no to you, but the no that you say to yourself is the strongest no. And I think familiarity breeds contempt, right, Tom? You're comfortable in your failure. Everyone around you is probably in the same boat. I don't know. That's why I often think people are more afraid of success than they are failure.
Well, I think Luisa referenced that comfort zone, right? It's easiest to do what we know, what we've done. It's a pain to do it differently, to challenge ourselves. I think we're all kind of inherently lazy in that respect, So.
Well, who doesn't want an easy life, right?
Right.
Who doesn't want an easy life? Well, when we talked about the self-sabotage in terms, people who are addicted, people who have significant issues, but I find that it goes on in people who don't have a lot of or have had a lot of serious obstacles. For example, somebody who grows up in an affluent family has those same feelings, for example, of doubt and self-sabotage. And so somebody who grew up in a position like me, I look at them and say, how can you've got everything in the world? Why would you be sabotaging yourself? Why would you think you're not worthy? So from where I stand, that's a hard concept for me to gather. But could you comment on that? I mean, every mind is it's its own world, so you can't know what goes into it. But that's one of the things I have trouble looking at.
Well, I think that you can't really say that because someone has everything or in an affluent family, they have everything and everything is fine, right? Everyone has their own truth. And so even if for you that obstacle is not really a problem, for them it might be because that's all they know. So it doesn't really matter if you've had all or everything in your life or not. It's just a matter of how they perceive or what is the problem they're having in their mind. So I wouldn't think it's fair to say, oh, you come from a wealthy family, you shouldn't have any problems, you know. And so it's how you perceive that reality you have. And it seems like you have been very resilient, like Tom said, and you've had very good coping mechanisms, but not everyone has that ability. And that ability comes from a various amount of things. So your family, your relationships, how you see others relate around you, your genetics. There's a lot of things going on there. Well, Tom, what do you think?
Absolutely. If I'm, does Tom Brady resonate down in Florida? Does that name mean anything?
Well, he's an up and coming quarterback, from what I heard. Yes.
Right. So, what if I were his son and I decided to play football? How could I possibly live up to that? So, it's as opposed to someone who doesn't have that accomplished of a father. As a football player, he might, some other kid might try out for high school football, get cut, and think, yeah, I don't like to get smacked around anyway. What's the big deal? Well, Tom Brady's son doesn't make the high school freshman football team. It would be a big deal. So it's
Yeah.
perspective, kind of the frame of reference.
So being in the shadow of your family success, that creates more stress because you can't measure up.
Oh, I think certainly that that can happen pretty easily, very easily. So
That's why it's very important to say that every mind is a different world. You don't really know the motivation. Where I've seen also self-sabotage is where people who've been out of the workforce, say, for a while, and they say, oh, I can't do it because I'm out of practice with my contemporaries and I'm so far behind. And what I found through personal experience, that some of those people who've been outside the workforce for a while end up being better workers. They've accumulated life experiences that the people they're working with do not have, makes them more efficient, makes them in some way better than doing that. But saying, well, I've been a stay-at-home mom, I've been a stay-at-home dad for years. How am I going to compete? How good am I going to be? Again, that's self-sabotaging, but that's, I see a lot of that. What do you think, Luisa and Tom?
I mean, if I would have been a stay-home mom for years and I have to go back to working, I think it's justified to be a little nervous about it. But I can't say that I won't do a good job until I actually do it and try it at least, right? So I can't base my emotion and my conflict in something that hasn't happened yet. So sure, I can be a little nervous, but like you said before, use that distress to motivate me to try my best. And if after trying I see that I couldn't do it, then I'll find a different way or something else, but just not basing it on what if, because all those what ifs haven't happened yet.
Yeah, there's my old law partner, Norm Anderson, used to say, well, if my aunt had a mustache, she would be my uncle. What if you can paralyze your life with what if this, what if that.
yeah, yes, boy, totally agree. Very easily that if you live in the future, you may never get there.
Yeah. You spend too much time thinking about the future and not enough time thinking of what do I need to do now to prepare for the future, you know?
Yeah. I add a little, I'm thinking about the transition from the VA, doing some part-time work, downshifting. And I've got a colleague, we need psychologists who are good evaluators. I know you're a good evaluator, to do autism assessments because it's the rage, right?
The spectrum, right? The spectrum.
There's at least in Michigan, incredible demand. They're months behind in getting kids assessed for autism. One, I've never done that. I don't know the instruments. I think, oh God, I better not try that. It's the self-doubt when, if I take a look at it, could I do those? Yeah, I could do those. I'd have to do some learning, a little retraining, but I suspect I could do those. But my first thought was, well, maybe this, maybe that, the doubts.
I'm a firm believer that nothing ever learned is wasted. I went from being a solo practitioner to working as chief international counsel for a Fortune 500 company. When you look at it on paper, you wonder how the heck did that happen? But it turns out that a lot of what I did in private practice has helped me immensely in the job I've been doing for the last almost 17 years. You could think, well, I'm not really qualified to do this, but once you have a basic skill set, this was the number of people don't realize. And I also think a lot of employers don't realize this when they're hiring people. You need a certain base knowledge and skill set. So in your situation, Tom, you could easily adapt to do this, assessments on the spectrum. Okay. But you have to have the background in psychology to do it. Okay. So what you've learned before, will pay this forward. And you have that knowledge. There isn't anything you can't do. There isn't anything you can't learn. But what you've learned in the past, I guarantee will almost inevitably help you in the future in some form or another. It always comes up.
Yeah.
Even the failures you have will benefit you from something in the future.
But look at you being so resilient again, Rudy. Cut it out.
I don't know about resilient, but
No, that is. You're defining it.
Well, when you remember when adoption stopped in 2008.
Oh yes.
I thought, what am I going to do? So I had a plan A, and my plan A was to continue, but in the domestic world.
Mm-hmm.
But then something unexpected came up, this opportunity, something that I had known. I've never worked for anybody. I worked for myself forever as a lawyer. And I said, I know nothing about title insurance. I said, that's okay. We'll teach you that. But we can't teach you what you know about international. We can't. You've got the language. You've got this. That's what we need. So going into a job that you're ostensibly or initially not qualified for, you realize, well, maybe you are, and you can learn certain things. So nothing ever learned is wasted. And the more you learn, the easier it becomes to learn other things, I think.
But those self-statements are not always typical, Rudy. Not everybody tells themselves that at a point when there's, I don't know if it's a crisis, but it's clearly a major career shift. But look at what you were telling yourself when there are certainly some other things someone could tell themselves that wouldn't lead you to adapt so successfully.
Well, I guess I've always taken the position, what do I have to lose? Somebody said something wise to me once. He said, look, aim for the moon. No, aim for the stars and you'll land on the moon. If you aim high, you don't make it, you'll fall in the middle, you're still better off. If you aim low, you're going to be right back where you started from. So, and my friends who said, why are you going to college when you can go work at the steel plant and you got to pay for education and you're going to make what I'm making and you spend all that money on education? Or people would say, do you really want, you really want to set the goal of being a lawyer? You might be disappointed if you don't make it. I said, well, God, what do I have to lose? If people already think you're a failure, then okay. One more failure isn't going to get me the gold medal of failures. They just say, oh, he's still a failure. There's no categories, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So that's just my personal journey and how I did it. I want to maybe switch a little bit to something that I noticed when I was practicing law. I handled a divorce for a woman who was in her third marriage and, well, divorcing her third husband. And each of her prior husbands were alcoholics. I asked her, what is it with you and alcoholics? She said, Rudy, there could be 100 men in a room, and I can just randomly pick one out, and that one would be the alcoholic. And I thought, okay, is there some kind of magnetism there, Tom and Luisa? Is we're subconsciously attracted to people who say may have those issues? Or, you get a woman who's in a domineering relationship, has been controlling, and then the next guy she's there is also controlling. What are your thoughts on that? I always found that kind of interesting. That when she said that to me, I still remember after all these years. Oh yeah, the 100 guys. Oh, he happens to be the alcoholic. Just my luck. Is there something in the subconscious they're working?
Oh, that's a complicated topic. I think that there is this kind of learned helplessness that I said before, that like you're familiar with this and you want to stick to this because that's what you know, and not necessarily it's the best for you, but that's what you know. And sometimes it could come from, let's say, an alcoholic father, and that's what you grew up with as your normal, or a need that you feel like you want to help people and you think you can help these type of people. There's just so many things that could be going on there, but I do think that it's unconsciously something that happens to you unless you realize that there's a problem with that and you actively want to change it. And it can be very hard to realize there's a problem. And so this woman could be having 10 more husbands with this same issue if she doesn't actively want to, or realize that this is a problem for her and making her life dysfunctional.
It's the same thing with women who are, with controlling men, for example. In the Latino world, the macho men, man controls, and that's just the way it is, Tom, you want to add to what Luisa said?
I don't know if there's much to add. I do think there is a familiarity. I think there is an unconscious, when you're talking about intimate relationships, there is an unconscious choice process that's going on, generally outside of our awareness, who your type is, so to speak. And that's it. Unless you become aware that you're exhibiting a pattern of behavior that's maybe not the healthiest thing you could do, you'll just keep doing it. Just rinse and repeat, and you just keep going on.
Now, with the short time we have left, I'd like to give somewhat of a, what would you recommend to people? I mean, what are the 3 things, not that you're giving the audience psychological advice, but what have you seen that are, say, 3 things people can do to get out of this self-sabotage? I mean, first it's the realization that you're doing it, right? But that's my view. But what's your view on that? What are 3 things that you can say, okay, these 3 things will get you on your journey to being better, or stop self-sabotaging yourself?
Well, I think it. I guess my first reaction is, do I really want it, or am I just saying I want it?
So first, be honest with yourself is the first thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's great to sit around and hope I have $1 million gets mailed to me, but that's not that's not going to happen. And or do you really what do you really want? Honest conversation with yourself is what you're saying valuable, really that valuable, or is it for some other reason? It would look good to others, etc. And then the question, well, can I, if I started it, could I pull it off, whatever I want to do? And then there's all those the corollaries to that I think you pointed out, Rudy, which is, hey, try it, get in. If you don't jump in the pool, you're never going to swim. So get the behavioral engagement going. And I would say, I guess the third is, okay, I've said I've wanted this objective for years or whatever it is. How have I let myself screw it up? If I want to lose my 50 pounds, whatever, and I'm going to the grocery store and buying a dozen donuts every week, it isn't going to change. So look at, what do you do to trip yourself up? Oh, so-and-so, my husband's so mean to me, so I deserve to eat those donuts. Because I'll guarantee you, everybody has a reason to self-sabotage.
Whether it's your own or somebody else's.
Right. But there's and until you defeat that reason, or those reasons, it's tough then to really focus on the goal. So to start moving towards that goal.
Luisa, any final comments?
Well, I think I agree with Tom, and I think it's the first thing you should do is define what is it that you want, why you want it, and how to obtain it. And in the how, it's a good idea to delineate a plan and start thinking, when do I want this to happen? Or when do I want to be happy, or whatever is it? Is it yesterday that I want it? Is it tomorrow? How about today? I want it today. I can't control what happened yesterday. I can't control what's going to happen tomorrow, but I can control what's happening today.
Right.
So if I know how I'm going to do it, then it's easier to get to my what I want to do. And if I keep my why I want to do it, I stay myself motivated towards it. And these realistic goals are things that I can do today, right? I can't make $1 million for tomorrow, but today I can start a plan or start a new job or something like that. So just think of the things that I can do for myself instead of what others will do for me, because I can't control that. And I think that will help you, like Tom said, determine what are the things I've done in the past that hasn't been effective, and focus more on the things that have been effective that could help me obtain my goal.
Well, that's really great advice from both of you. I appreciate it. Thank you for appearing on my program. I said I try to make them a half hour, but they almost get into an hour because the discussion gets so, involved in really great discussion. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Click the bell so you can get more great videos like this. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Luisa Maria, again.
Thank you.
You're most welcome. Good to see you.